This is Hospitality and Politics. I'm Andrew Ridgie. This show is powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance, and I am here with Max Tucci of Tucci's and the iconic, historic Delmonico's restaurant. How's it going?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Oh my goodness, we were having such a good conversation just before
pre-show.
Yeah, pre-show. You know, the warm up. Where do I even start? Okay, let's frame it. Delmonico's. Yeah. Can you tell me about the restaurant? And then we're going to get into all the details and your journey and the family and
Tucci.
Tucci and oh my goodness.
So first and foremost, thank you for having me here.
Of course.
And, Delmonico's, I have my takeaways, for everyone who's listening. It's older than the Brooklyn Bridge, older than the Statue of Liberty, older than public running water. So considered America's first fine dining restaurant. But what Delmonico's really significant for today, especially, is that it was Italian-Swiss immigrants who came to America at a time. Remember, 1827, New York wasn't the New York we know it today. There were, in my new book that I'm writing, there were hogs and heifers and horses all over downtown New York. The carriages were, cutting up the roads. There was mud everywhere. You could smell death and you can smell the salt of the sea, and how it was such an important part of New York.
Yeah.
And so imagine being taverns. You have Francis Tavern, which is the oldest tavern in New York. And that's where men went to go drink. So now imagine these Italian-Swiss immigrants come to America, 1827, and they open a bonbon cordial shop down on William Street. And what they introduced to America was this new sophistication, this new aspect of dining. Even though it was more or less a cafe, they started to introduce the tablecloth. They started to introduce wait service. And this goes back to 1827, and so what Delmonico's brought to America was this sophistication of European elegance, and what it taught America, who had such a desire. This is before the Gilded Age.
Yeah.
People think Delmonico's was just the Gilded Age, and of course today the Gilded Age, they just shot down at Delmonico's 2 days. They were filming there for season 4. So pre-Gilded Age, you had the rough New York, and now it was getting sophisticated because of these brothers. So they brought a huge, I think, European flair to New York. And ever since then the Great Fires, 1835, destroyed that location. 1837 is the location that we've been at almost 200 years next year. So it's an interesting story. But more importantly, I think what it did to New York and for New York was open the doors for everyone who has fine dining today.
It's so amazing. I just think about food and restaurants and places where people go and gather and socialize and how they're such a part of the fabric of New York City and part of the history.
Yeah.
Like you can't tell New York City's story without talking about, you mentioned Francis Taverns, Delmonico's, and some of these other restaurants, because they really did help shape the culture. And that the fact that the restaurants are still here today.
They're still here.
Which is just, blows
It's the
my
phoenix
mind.
that rises from the ashes,
Yeah.
Delmonico's.
Yeah.
Prohibition couldn't stop it. Plagues couldn't stop it. COVID couldn't stop it. Katrina couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
It keeps rising. And so there's a reason why.
So when did your family get involved with the restaurant?
So Prohibition happened, and the Delmonico brothers were really bleeding money. They were big gamblers. They were spending more than they could. They had several locations throughout the city. In that expansion, Prohibition was a huge part of their failure for my research, 2 reasons. 1, they were running out of money. And 2, remember, Delmonico's wasn't a steakhouse. It was fine French dining. You had Chef Filippini, you had Chef Ranhofer. So what was compromised in their food were the ingredients with alcohol. So now their food starts changing, right? And also I think their name was so big that they couldn't open, a speakeasy.
Yeah.
They would get caught in a second.
Too prominent.
So they were closing all their locations. And my grandfather, who at the time owned some property down in Wall Street area, was always in love with the Delmonico building. And Italian immigrant from Tuscany, came originally to New York, I think in 1912 with my great grandfather and explored New York. And of course, Delmonico's was there. And so he made an offer to buy what was then the abandoned Delmonico's. to the point where it was considered to be knocked down. And so not only did he save the iconic building, but the brand, the name, the recipes, and everything that was basically left behind. So the archives that I have because of my grandfather, my Aunt Mary, my father, my mother, are silk menus, printed on silk for the royal family of UK. So what Oscar did was he was a daydreamer, at a time where daydreaming, I don't know, it was a time when the Prohibition was shutting people down, and he saw past it. And in 1926, he had a speakeasy downstairs. And then by 1933, had the third liquor license in New York. And when you really then start going into the history of Delmonico's under Oscar Tucci, by 1950s, he owned the entire building, was operating almost 70,000 square feet of restaurant space. So the Harvard Lunch Club, there was a floor. Lehman Brothers had a floor. The Bull and Bear Room, the Baroque Room, the Python Room, the Hunt Room, the Palm Room. And Oscar, my grandfather, Oscar Tucci, what he did for New York was when he saw someone who was coming to work for him, he could see who was going to be a star, including Ciro Macchioni, Tony May, Leila Arpaia, Fedora Dorado. These were some of the people that worked originally at Delmonico's. So Oscar really not only reopened and revived Delmonico's, but he gave a seat to the table for those that he thought were going to be amazing.
And built the foundation which the restaurant industry in New York City then grew upon, you know? That's so fascinating because I mentioned, even, for Sirio or, Tony May. I remember, I think it was New York Magazine years ago did a cover with Sirio, and it showed all the, chefs and restaurateurs that worked for him and then kind of webbed
now
out.
Back out.
If you were to
and
go
then you
even
go to
back,
Oscar.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's it's just so fascinating, the history and
So Oscar was really, there's this, I call it the Delmonico culinary tree. The Delmonico brothers are the roots, Oscar's the trunk, Ciro is the branch, and then Daniel is the leaf, right? And so Oscar was really the trunk of this culinary tree that, to your point, New York owes a lot to Oscar.
It's beautiful.
And I don't say that because he's my grandfather, but stepping aside as a historian and anyone who sees what Oscar did, Sirio didn't have papers. And my grandmother was the one who paid for him to go back to Montecatini to get his paperwork in order, to come back. And then he went on to Le Cirque.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I love these stories, and they are just true New York stories. I don't know where else they could have happened.
Yeah, only here.
So what about you? Growing up in the business, my family, going back to my great-grandparents, had bakeries and cafes, and then my grandfather and my aunt, and I was younger and I worked there and always worked in the industry. And it's no matter what I did, I tried to do this or that, but then I always somehow ended up back in restaurants or food service. And then I got into the advocacy side of the industry. But what was your upbringing? Were you forced hey kid, you're coming in, you got to come to work? Or was it something that when you got a little older, you got back into?
Forced, no. Guided, yes.
Forceful guidance.
Forcefully guided. My father was super strict.
Okay.
When I wrote the book, The Delmonico Way, people thought it was just the Delmonico Way and what it means. No, that was how we were raised, was this really is schooling that my grandfather also taught my father, and then my grandfather taught Sirio and Tony. So you'll see a lot of the commonalities between these men because of Oscar Tucci, and also Fedora Dorado down at Fedora's, in the West Village. But my father wanted me to really take over. Newspapers, even when I was 6 years old, they were writing third generation in training, right? This is when I was 6.
Wow.
And then my mother had a comment that, or a quote in the papers, little Oscar Maximilian Tucci is cleaning the ashtrays today. So what they taught me as a child in the industry were a couple of things. The welcome, how to be the host, and how to greet people, and how to be with people. And also then they taught me, which haunts me today, is the chips in plates. I had to search for those as a child. Now when I go to a restaurant, there's a chip in the plate. I'm like, okay, where I can the camera? Light bulbs, right? If there are light bulbs out, that was my responsibility. So I can't go to a restaurant today without noticing. And not today, it's even one step further besides the light bulb. Because now if it's a warm bulb and a cold bulb, I can't process that because I have flashbacks of Daddy Dearest.
Yes. Outside of those, I love those skills, the things that you learn. But outside of that, what kind of texture to your personality and your like soul did growing up in that environment bring you?
So, like Eloise, right? I'm Max of Delmonico's.
Yes.
Matter of fact, I'm writing a children's book now, similar to the Eloise concept, but Max of Delmonico's. So I was afforded this playground. Delmonico's was my playground, you know, where you never knew who was coming in. And it was such a grand childhood. You know, I say my father was the producer of my childhood and my mother was the director, right? And I was allowed to be part of this restaurant as a child. And first and foremost, run amok in the kitchen, which would drive all the chefs crazy. My sister and I used to go and we used to take all the pastries and lock ourselves in my Aunt Mary's office and eat them, right? So imagine being part of not only Delmonico's, but the grandeur of Delmonico's. And now you're this child running around there. Yeah. It was a magical experience and childhood. But my father, total Italian family man, the restaurant was super important, but family time was even more important. And so we have a home in Florence, Italy, 5 generations that were there. And he would take a lot of time to bring us to Italy to learn our heritage, to meet our family. And then with Delmonico's, you know, we would come back and it was like, you know, school was open again and we were there and it was just, we had one in Greenwich, Connecticut also, another Delmonico's. And I remember my sister and I, we were in charge of the coats and we used to throw them on the floor. Like Ivana Trump would come in with her big chinchilla coat and like we would be like, you know, making forts out of these fur coats and my mother would go insane.
Well, kids, you got to find something to do. You're playing.
We were in the coat room. Like we weren't in the main dining room. And so it was a magical experience, but meeting people at a young age. You know, I was meeting like celebrities and politicians and I didn't know who anyone was. But, you know, my mother, I had a little jacket and a tie, a little clip-on tie because I would rip them off. And my mother would be like, today you're meeting, so, you know, Diane Carroll, right? Or whomever. And so I didn't know who they were, but it was just the introduction. And I remember I would like look up at these people and they were like, it was mesmerizing, you know, and people dressed then, you know, like they came to Delmonico's in furs and diamonds and men in suits. And it was like unbelievable. Yeah. And so there's that movie, The Greatest Showman. And I feel like that was kind of like my childhood mixed with the movie Big Fish, where I tell everyone these stories and no one believes me. But then when I'm dead, everyone's going to be at my funeral kind of a thing. You know, so it's like, it was incredible. It was incredible.
That's great. Do you like, it's interesting. A couple of times you've kind of weaved in, you know, like writing the book and having this place be this like magical place and a magical childhood. It's creative. Like I get so much creativity from you and your personality. Do you think the ability to both that strictness, which you need to be strict if you want to run a good, successful restaurant business, but you also have to be creative, you know?
Absolutely.
How much of like the creativity do you think was a product of like your upbringing versus being innate? And like, do you practice your creativity?
I do. Well, all right. So my father was super creative.
Yeah.
He also debuted at Carnegie Hall. He played the piano and sang. Okay. He was an artist. Remember, like my father's family comes from Florence, Italy. This Renaissance blood is mixed into mine. It's just part of my DNA. Yeah. My mother, fascinating story. My mother is a war refugee from Lithuania.
Oh, wow.
Escaped. She was born in Lithuania. They lived in displaced person camp for 5 years in Hanau, Germany. She had no food at these displaced person camps. And yet when she came to America, they came to Brooklyn and she was walking down the street. She was like 17 right here in New York on Lexington Avenue. And a gentleman stopped her who was a fur buyer and said he wanted her to model. So she became a model in the fur industry. She became the first woman buyer for furs. She went on to becoming the first female vice president for Maximilian Furs and Revlon. She opened the Jaeger store on Madison Avenue. She also had the Roberto Di Camerino store with Onassis at Olympic Towers. So I come from a family that's super creative to begin with. Yeah. And storytellers. You know, my mom, her stories about her childhood are incredible. She's working now on her memoir, which is incredible. When you think of the fact that she would stand in lines for food And if you had a bad potato, that day was your bad luck. To then fast forward, it was like having cornucopias of caviar at Delmonico's. So, her life was fascinating, is fascinating. And my father always taught us. He was teaching us the drums, the piano, and of course, hosting. That was like innate. Shake the hand, look people in the eyes, polish your shoes, make sure your nails are clean. He would line the staff up at Delmonico's before they would go out, and he would check their hair, their nails, their shoes, the frog buttons, everything had to be perfectly polished. And so growing up in that environment, it was stressful as a kid because everything had to always have this perfection. And in the book, I wrote that the patina in life now has become the perfection.
True.
Right?
Well, it is really, a beautiful, mixture of that discipline and that creativity. And so often those two don't always go together, but just talking to you and seeing the work that you create, you really see both of them manifest. Yeah. So what's your day to day now between obviously TUCCI's, which we can talk about TUCCI's as well.
TUCCI.
But I know I see you all over the place, but what's your role at the restaurant? What are you focused on these days?
With Delmonico's, third generation partner and also chief brand officer and guest experience, right? So for me, it's really about honoring the guest, the validation. I see you, I hear you matter. That to me plays a huge important role in my life and in the restaurant's life. It was what I was taught that. And so for me, having people come into Delmonico's, I want them to feel and know my family and the Delmonico brothers and the chefs that work there. So really that's storytelling. TUCCI, TUCCI is an honor to the Tucci family, to Oscar and Mario, because Delmonico is not my last name, and so people always think that I'm a Delmonico, and I write, two families diverged, right? The Delmonico and the Tucci family. But Tucci is really, I'm very big in honoring ancestors. And I think one of the best ways to honor them, yes, is to have their pictures up, but it's also to share their stories. And so when I'm able to share their stories, their recipes, their photos, and have my name on Broadway, which is their name, it puts their name in lights. And it shares who they were, what they did for this city. And so TUCCI is my love letter to my ancestors. And then I have TUCCI Villa, where I do the Florentine experience, where you could rent the villa. You come there. We're doing the TUCCI olive oil now, so you can go in the olive groves. I have TUCCI wine, so you can go to the vineyard and experience that all. We're doing these wine safaris. Chef Gabe, actually, from Chow House, he's going to be the chef at one of my my dinners. The Max Tucci Tuscan wine safaris.
Oh, that's
So we were supposed to do that this year.
That sounds nice.
But we're opening another Delmonico's next year, so we're pushing it, I think, to next May.
Yeah. With the guest experience, we can talk about Delmonico's, but then also at TUCCI. How do you honor tradition while also being modern? Because you mentioned the days of people, the women in their fur coats, and the men in the suit and tie, but the world's just changed, like now a nice pair of sneakers is considered in many places, a nice shoe. Yeah. Some people may disagree with it, but, you want to preserve tradition. You want to create an incredible guest experience, but, in some ways, with the exception of maybe some restaurants that can still, I don't want to say get away with it, but still have kind of an older yesteryear type of steps of service and experience. You kind of meet people where they are and you want to give them that experience. So how do you balance all this tradition that you're upholding while at the same time, catering to what the modern guest expects and desires in a dining experience?
My grandfather was famous for saying all are welcomed at the table. I like to say pick your battles. It's interesting. I think self-worth is a huge part of the industry. And when you get into the hospitality industry, me personally, what I offer people when I do talks and such is you have to love people.
Yeah.
Before you do the industry, before you love the food, before you love the interior, before you love the lighting, before you love the glitz, the glamour, the grit, you have to love people, right? And not in the sense where you're welcoming them. And meet people where they are. And when you learn, teach, right? Yeah. So sometimes people just don't know. And that's why I wrote the book, The Delmonico Way, because you remember, I mean, if we go back to Emily Post and etiquette, I would never be wearing a hat here today. And it was, do I wear a hat today or don't I?
Yeah.
And is this mean that, when people see me, will they come to the restaurant wearing a hat? Don't.
Yeah.
We're having a podcast right now. But I think when you have self-worth and when you dress up and when you present yourself and when you go out, you're heightening the experience for yourself, right? And so it's taking your attire one step further, not only for yourself, but when you come into Tucci, people there, you can tell they thought about their outfits, right? Especially Tucci. Mm-hmm. And it's a jewel box. And when you go inside, there are jewels inside. And that's everyone who dines there collectively. And I think they're making a choice to, when they see us on Instagram or when they see us on social media, they see that like we're about dressing up and having a good time. And it heightens the experience. When you feel better about yourself, you have a better time.
I agree. And I think too that like now for so many people going out to dinner, going out to a restaurant bar, it's just kind of part of the culture, especially in New York. So there is something very special when you go out with intent. Yeah. You're going somewhere and you're getting dressed up and you're going out for, more than just a meal and conversation, but an overall experience.
To see and be seen.
Exactly.
A white shirt and jeans. I'm going to the Derby Club tonight. Yeah. So right from here, I'm taking this hat off, throw some water in my hair like Riccardo Muti, and go to the Derby Club. Yeah. And that's just, this outfit transitions to that, and so, I love when people dress up. Yeah. And what's fascinating to me is that children, Delmonico's has a lot of children coming in now because it's become residential. Those,
they
those
converted
buildings,
all
they've
those
converted.
Office buildings.
And these children are dressed. Like they have their little jacket on, they have a little tie on. I'm thinking some of these kids are dressed better than some of the adults.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see that these kids feel good, And it's interesting because when they come in, their parents told them, you better behave. Mm-hmm. So they come in and I see their faces because I know myself when I was little in those same, little shoes. When I walked in and my mother's like, you better behave. Yep. I can see the fear in their eyes when they walk in. And then when I see them, like I give them a little lapel pin and I'm like, tonight you're my assistant manager.
Oh, they must have so much fun when they get to meet you and talk.
And they're dressed so perfectly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
When you go out, so, I always like to ask restaurant people, like when they, go out, even, sometimes I'm like, you're doing market research. Sometimes they're like, I just like to face the wall. Otherwise, I'm looking out at everything. But when you go out, what do you look for in a restaurant experience?
Oh, I look for the moment that I walk in, that moment where I feel welcomed. That's really number one. If whoever's at the front of the house, that front door, train them to make people feel welcome the moment they step in. That's number one. Number two, light bulbs. Those light bulbs all better be working because it's not just the light bulb. The light bulb shows that if one is out, you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
So is your kitchen clean? Are those little baskets in your bathroom being cleaned out? And I go down to Tucci so many times and I'm like, we got to clean up all the paper towels. It's all those attentions to detail that I look for, which is again, the Delmonico way. I love to support friends, right? And I also love, I love food trucks. Yeah. There's one on 63rd Street. Those guys, they bust their ass in those hot trucks.
Oh yeah.
And they're serving some great food throughout the night. They're open throughout the night. So for me, it's the experience is the welcome, I think is the most important. When my grandfather would say, all are welcome to my table, I flirted with a podcast called Welcome to My Table. I had Max and Friends for 20 years on LA Talk Radio. But welcome to the table and welcome to my space it changes the whole dynamic. Yeah. I mean, when you walk into a space and people are genuinely happy that you're there, it changes everything.
You can feel it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sometimes it's not even something you can put into words. There's just a feeling, it's like the essence of the room.
That's the easiest thing. And I don't blame the host or the hostess. That comes with management and ownership. If you're not training your host, your welcome committee, which is what I call them, to smile, to welcome people, to genuinely extend themselves, to say thank you for being here, huge difference.
When talking about training, one of the things I constantly hear from and discuss with restaurateurs and chefs, is mentorship and how important mentorship is in our industry. Can you talk, obviously, you had family and you had these incredible mentors, but is there, I guess, anything that you haven't mentioned that someone did or showed you that left a lasting impression? And now in your role, you're in a leadership role.
Yeah.
And I feel like leaders, we always have to be growing. Like, what do you do to mentor and inspire and keep your team excited to be at the restaurant? So when a guest walks in, they are providing that experience that you want your guests to have.
Yeah. So great question. Many facets. First and foremost, I read a book, the Juju something. I can't recall the full name right now. And in the chapter, she writes, we're all still learning. So once we're in that position that we're all still learning, no one's right, no one's wrong.
Yeah.
Because there's a flexibility to learning, right? Yeah. Maya Angelou, when you learn, teach. One of my greatest mentors who recently passed, Clive Davis, when I was opening TUCCI, I was in Florida when I got the call that this space was found and to come up and see it. And I said to Clive, Clive, this is an opportunity. What should I do? And in his famous voice, he's like, don't think about the money. Don't think about, the business. Fall in love with the space. And if you walk into that space and you feel like you're home, take it. And so that really, I think for any restaurateur, and anyone who's going into this industry, fall in love with this space because it's going to be your first home, right? We spend more hours in the restaurant
first home
than we do at home, right? And so I never thought about it that way until Clive presented it to me that way. So when I walked into 643 Broadway, it felt like I was at home at the Villa in Italy with the exposed brick and the arches. And, we had to do a little bit of work there. We took that place over in January of 23 and of 24 and opened in March, right? Yeah. So 2.5 months.
Yeah, it's a quick time.
Because it felt right. And so that was one of the biggest, I was just on the phone with Marissa May the other day, Tony May's daughter, and we were talking about doing a restaurant. And I said, we have to fall in love with the space. She's like, Maxie, we have to do this. I'm like, Marissa, no, hear me. We have to fall in love with the space. There's so many, we're offered so many spaces all the time, but we have to fall in love with it. And so, and then I observe. Being a great observer and listening is really important. I observe, one of my favorite humans in this whole world is Chef Aisha. And when I'm at Chouquette,
I was just there last week, 2 weeks ago. It's so good.
I'm going there tomorrow.
Nice.
And so I'm like, so good.
I know.
But watching Chef on that line and how everyone, there's a harmony.
Yeah.
She commands the space, but she offers herself. I've never seen someone so intense work on the line like that. And it's an open kitchen, as you know. So there's no room for error. And that team, I can see they honor her. They respect her. They look up to her. And to me, we honored her with the IACP Trailblazer Award. I'm on the board with IACP. And when we were asked who do we think could be, a trailblazer for the industry, Chef Aisha was my number one. Yeah. And then Rosanna Scotto was number 2 because Rosanna has done so much for the industry. When you see her on the news, it's one thing and she's up, 4:00 in the morning. But then right afterwards, she goes over to Fresco, busts her ass.
The best. She was on the show. She came on the podcast.
So hey, Rosanna.
The best.
And I do great cooking segments with her.
I know.
I just pitched a cooking segment with her. I said, because Steve Cuso said that I had the best meatballs, but he also said that Rosanna had the best meatballs. But I said, his headline in the New York Post was, move over Carbone. There's a new Italian restaurant in town with the best meatballs.
Boom.
So drop mic. So I said, let's do something with Good Day New York where we bring who we think has the best meatballs, and Rosanna and I are going to be the judges for the New York meatball contest.
I love it.
You like it?
I love it. It's great. Ro. Just so you know, her son, LJ, has an incredible podcast.
Yes, he does.
And he records in the studio.
Oh, he's here?
Yeah.
Nothing off the table? Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that it?
Yeah.
Damn, I'm good.
You're good. It's
fresh.
Yeah, I know. See that? Absolutely. Yes.
But family. It's family too.
This is,
family.
I think, listen, this is kind of even going back to what we were saying at the beginning of the conversation about how these are such New York stories. They're New York families. Yeah. They're these, just the people. It's salt of the earth people. And I think people doesn't matter what walk of life you're from, when you go into a great restaurant and you receive hospitality, get to eat delicious food, make these special memories. There is something that people connect with. And that's why it's so important, to New York and to carry on tradition. And, and I love also just like the amount of love that you've shared with so many different people across the industry and all walks of life, just part of this conversation. It's remarkable. And I think it is the power of our industry in connecting people and sharing stories.
Look, I was raised in a very unique way, right? From Park Avenue to Greenwich, Connecticut, to Florence, Italy, to Delmonico's. And I had a nanny who once taught me at a very young age, the asses you kick on the way up will be the ones you kiss on the way down. I never knew what that meant when I was 9 or 10 years old, right? Now it makes sense. So what does that mean? That means that as much as I'm an observer, people are also watching me. Right. And that's why I go into Melba's, we just called her before the show. Y'all missed the pre-show.
I know. We should have been recording. The camera wasn't rolling or the mics weren't.
But when I go into Melba's and if she's not there, she makes it feel like she's there. I'm like, I'll sit at the table and before I know it, that oxtail is already there. My iced tea is already there. And I'm like, it's like those moments that I feel like, okay, Melba, like she gets it and she'll be in Greece. And I'm like, are you like around the corner? She's like, I'm in Greece. I'm like, oh, you pack lightly with all your caftans, right? But it's important, I think, that even if you're not in the restaurant that night, that your guest feels so welcome that it feels like you're there.
Well, I mean, listen, Melba has that, just the presence that she leaves in a room after she's walked out of that room has something that I feel like changes the air. And she makes people, it doesn't matter who they are. I've been in so many spaces with Melba and just the people she knows. And even if she's meeting them for the first time, it doesn't matter, if it's, coat check or the dishwasher or, the mayor or, some other fancy person. She makes everyone feel so special.
And you know who else does that? Whoopi Goldberg. She wrote a book called The Unqualified Hostess. I Do It My Way So You Could Too. And Rizzoli published it. That's actually this book that I wrote took 15 years to write, was turned down by dozens of publishers, told that Delmonico's is insignificant, we don't have the numbers for it, et cetera, et cetera. I'm hosting a party for Whoopi at Delmonico's. And what I loved about that moment was when people wanted pictures, everybody wanted pictures at the restaurant. Whoopi took a moment to take them with the dishwashers, the chef, the busboys, right? The servers, the runners. There was not one, she even stopped a group of people so that all the busboys can come in and take a picture with her. And in that moment, I thought, that's what my grandfather always taught. Do you see me? Do you hear me? And do I matter? The validation. And I think when we take that as restaurateurs and hosts, when we take that one step further, as Jennifer English would say, one step further, and we now bring that school of thought to our clients, to our guests. And when you say to a guest, I see you, I hear you, you matter, and you validate them, you have someone who will come back for life.
So
and
true.
Melba does that.
Yes, 100%.
And Chef Aisha does that, right? And so many great restaurateurs do that. Those that get it, when it's not about you and it's about your customer, that's the kind of restaurant I like.
And it costs so much money to run a restaurant, but it costs nothing to be kind.
That's right. To validate people.
To embrace people.
Look,
to validate
Maureen
people.
at Donahue's, right? I love her. She's maybe not the kindest person. No kidding. She'll drop the F-bomb here and there, but that's what makes her genuine. When you're real to who you are and you can still love people, you got me.
So how do you, I got to say, you got an amazing flair. You are uniquely your own person. And I feel like, people are always trying to find and figure out who they are, where they belong, what they should do. And like you said, you had an interesting upbringing between, Delmonico's, Greenwich, Florence, all of these places. So that's unique. But everyone has to find their own way, and it doesn't necessarily mean, you're going to be successful. But I feel like even looking at your book, which is beautiful, and I'm looking forward to reading it, like, you have to put in the work and you have to be resilient. And especially when you're in this business, we're talking about going on TV and promoting the business yourself. How have you, or what do you do to just work on yourself so you can be the best you professionally, but also personally? Because I suspect, like for myself and a lot of people in this industry, like the line where the personal and the professional, end, it's kind of hard to tell because the people in the industry are like your family and friends.
Yeah. So for me, meditation, huge, right? To take those moments to just reflect, no matter what time of the day it is. I like to wake up early and do it. Meditation is a huge part of my being. Also, have the courage to be disliked. It's a great Japanese philosophy. There's a book called The Courage to be Disliked. And you said finding yourself. I think the best journey is when you don't know what you want and life starts unfolding naturally, but you do the work.
Yes.
You're doing some sort of work, right? And like this book, 15 years, it was rejected. So you step back, I step back, and I look at the bigger picture and I say, okay, rejection's protection, but what does this all mean? And do I give up? No, you keep doing the work, right? And so I think, just being authentic to who you are, if you know who you are. Gordana Biernat, I interviewed her many times on my show, Max and Friends. She's part of Oprah Super Soul 100. She wrote a book called #Know the Truth, Why Knowing Who You Are Changes Everything, right? And so her passages in that book remind me constantly of my purpose. My purpose, I have several purposes. One for the restaurant. What is the legacy that I have to carry on? Who do I have to continue to honor? Who do I have to continue to talk about? My personal life. What brings me joy? That's being in Florence and the olive groves and, and in the vineyards and immersing myself in my Tuscan heritage. And so that balance of what brings me joy, what is my purpose, and also knowing that we're all still learning. And Alan Watts, he says, amazing philosopher. If you don't know him, y'all Google Alan Watts. But he says, imagine waking up and never going to sleep. And now imagine going to sleep and never waking up. Where are we all in all of this thing called life?
Yeah.
And, I love the quote that he also says is that man suffers only because he takes serious what the gods made for fun. And we're in this playground we're in New York. This is the biggest playground in the world, right? And we have every culture at our fingertips. And all we have to do is open the door to explore, and take that moment to explore. Like when I go around New York, I'm always exploring to see what's going on. What are people doing? Where are they succeeding? Where are they failing? And take a moment to explore. That's what I do.
I like that. You got to. I, especially with the phone, I've been trying to do this thing where just when I'm walking, just keep my phone in my pocket, look up. I mean, it's amazing. You just see the designs on buildings and other people, and it's, there's so many excuses why we can just be in our phone or not be present. And,
we just did a big campaign called the Look Up campaign. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I feel like maybe tell me about it.
Yeah. So, Nikki Haskell, who was one of the first women on Wall Street. Also, she had the first TV show in Studio 54, the Nikki Haskell show, where she interviewed everybody. She has, plug for her on Amazon. Go look at the show. But Nikki brought this project to me called Look Up. And it's what makes you look up New York. And now it's Venice and it's traveling all over. For me, I said, what makes me look up, I was standing in front of the Delmonico building. And I said, what makes me look up is my ancestors and knowing that their daydreams became their reality. And then I point to the building. And when you stand afar and you look at the Delmonico building and you think that A, it could have been knocked down if not for Oscar, B, what it housed and what it houses and what is being created in that building. Every night there's a memory is being created for someone, whether it's a marriage or a divorce, whether it's, a happy dinner or because we're grieving because we lost someone. And I think that when we look up at all of that's happening here in New York, when you just look up in an apartment and all right, there's a building, but in that building, we see that thing on social media where it's like, this apartment, this person just got divorced.
Yes.
This person's making love. This person's, considering suicide. Like that's the whole, this is what's, when we look up, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
More than just our phone. And it's healthier to look up because those little humps that we're getting in the back of our neck from always looking down, we're massaging them out. So look up, New York.
Indeed. Look up. What do you think the state of the New York City restaurant industry is? Obviously, it's a very tough business. There's the market. There's a lot of competition, food costs, labor costs, rules, regulations, all these things.
Yeah.
But it's also such an incredibly vibrant industry. And whether it's, Delmonico's or Amelba's or the food truck, and there's just so many neighborhoods. I mean, the Hospitality Alliance, we're a 5-borough-wide association, and we have members of all kinds, like all different neighborhoods. And I look at the vibrancy, the uniqueness of it, but I also recognize the immense, challenges from like your perspective and your kind of interactions through it. What is the state? A big question, big philosophical question.
The Sunny Hoiston, when she's on The View, she goes like that. I don't know, and I don't pretend to know.
Yeah.
I think that it's a cutthroat industry. People are trying their hardest to survive in it. And, the industry is known for so many things, but it's also known for the biggest failure rate. Like they say, if a restaurant usually closes within 3 months of its open, if it's not successful, we waste 40 to 50% of food. I'm with City Harvest. So for me, like observing that too. So how can we make the industry better? And I think that together we rise. And I don't say that to be like, an Oprah quote.
Sure.
But together we really do rise. And I think, like when Steve wrote like the best meatballs, I emailed Carbone. I was like, there's room in this city for everyone's meatballs.
Yeah.
And it's not taking stake in this is me. It's not about me. It's an industry that's about us, right? And when one restaurant is successful, another is successful. And I think what's great, like God's Love We Deliver and City Harvest, when City Harvest does their events and all the restaurants are present, that's when you can see that we're all in this industry because we want to feed people. We want to give them our heritage, our cuisines. We want them to understand who we are, not only as a person, but as food. And so I think that really Together We Rise is something that the industry needs to look at deeper. And not be like, well, this is my restaurant and this is that. And this, it's like, no, we're all in this because hopefully we are all under the same understanding that service, how may I be of service to you?
Yeah.
Right? How may I welcome you? How can I welcome you to my table? And I think when we let go of all of the ego in this industry, which is a huge part of the industry. And, ego's great. There's so many philosophers who say ego's bad. No, ego is great because it makes us understand who we are. But using it is a different way, right? So when we understand who we are and we understand that we all want to welcome everyone to the table, I think it can make the industry so much better in the sense where you know the number. How many restaurants do we have in New York right now?
It's 24,000 plus restaurants.
I mean, one just opened, one just closed.
Sometimes I don't know if they open or close, quicker. But honestly, that's really music to my ears because, with the Hospitality Alliance, it's about building that community. We are a collective industry. And when we can work together, advocate on each other's behalf, when we can support different causes, I just published this op-ed with Tom DiNapoli, the state comptroller, to look at like the economics of the industry. And, 24,000 plus restaurants, 270,000 plus employees, people from all walks of life.
That's right.
$28 billion annual economic impact, $2.5 billion in sales tax, that's funding our essential services, our fire department, police, schools, sanitation. You really start to see how it is such an essential and critical part of the fabric of New York. And you mentioned City Harvest and God's Love and these other organizations.
Food Bank. I mean, there's so many.
Rethink. And when you go into, I had Emma's Torch on this talking about, they do, training refugees to, work in the restaurant industry. And when you walk into like a City Harvest event, for example, and you see all these chefs, restaurateurs there coming together, raising enormous amounts of money to help feed fellow New Yorkers, you really see the beauty and the strength in collective action of our industry.
It takes, I think the biggest disconnect for hospitality, I know we got to wrap it up because I see you looking over there.
No, we got some time.
Is the word conviviality. And they go hand in hand, right? I like to say it's really an industry of hospitality conviviality. And when you see moments like those events, that's when you see not only the hospitality, but you see the conviviality.
Yes.
Right? And you see the understanding. And they're beautiful moments.
Yeah.
They're beautiful moments.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, when we do like our, cocktail parties and stuff, and like I look in the corner, I see like, oh, that's one of our members, their restaurant, in Bed-Stuy. And then I got someone from the South Bronx. Then you got someone, well-known chef, from the Village. And they're all kind of like hanging out. And like, then the elected official walks in and the commissioner of this agency, and people just are there as people. And I feel like creating spaces where people in our industry and that are adjacent to it can kind of come together with their egos and their excitement, but also kind of put them down and be one. It's really a beautiful thing. And I think that's what helps power our industry and really why it's also so successful, because as much as like, people want to have a successful restaurant, the thing you always hear, like, why'd you get into the industry? So much of it is like, because I want to make other people happy, And how long does that last for, though?
Yeah. When that's your goal, remember that being your goal.
Yeah.
Like Clive said, don't think about the money. Don't think about the business. Think about the people. Yeah. Think about why you originally got into it.
And it's tough when you get into the grind of it day to day. Of course it's tough,
but it's, it's doing that work. When you do, Jan Levin says you got to do the work. When you do the work, at the end of the day, it pays off. Yeah. Right? And the end of the day might not be right away, and the payoff might not be what you thought. But if your passion is because you want to make people happy, continue to do it. Yeah. And the struggle is real. I'm working on a show now called Restaurant Revival, where restaurants are closing and I go in, we're writing this right now. And, I was once told that, if you need an NDA or this or that, it's foolish because what you're thinking about, someone's already doing, right? So I'm not scared to share projects. But so Restaurant Revival goes into restaurants, family restaurants that are on the brink of closing to figure out why are they closing? Why don't the children want to take over? Right? Because it's fair. If they don't want to, it's fair, it might not be their dream, the restaurant, but to go in and try to save these restaurants from closing. There's that Jeremiah's vanishing New York. Yes. So much of New York is vanishing. Yeah. I walked by Donahue's the other day, 75 years, and Maureen ripped the name off of the awning. And I'm like, we can't have, all of these restaurants that are iconic to New York close. These are the fabric of the city. And so I encourage and I urge people who are getting in this industry to really make sure you want to do it and love people.
There is so much opportunity to help save. I had my friend Loyson Gordon. He was on the show from Near's Historic Tavern in Queens in Woodhaven, which is like the oldest, and I think consecutive running pub's going to be, 200 years old. And there's just so much, history there. And, almost lost it to rent increases. And then mayor got involved and people rallied. And he always talks about, community and building a community around your business and how important it is for the longevity and to carry on these stories and get it to 200 years and after and be able to tell these stories. I mean, the famous scenes in Goodfellas were filmed there and all these other shows, and people connect to it, and it's really, really special, but it takes, a lot of love because it's the nights, weekends, holidays.
Let's talk about San Domenico, right? Marissa.
Yeah.
San Domenico didn't close because there was a scandal. It didn't close because there was some sort of, the food wasn't good. They were the first 3-star restaurant from the New York Times, Italian restaurant. Yeah. Okay. They closed because of rent increase. Back then, this was, I think, 2008 or 9. Mm-hmm. Tony May's rent went up to $1.25 million, and so he was a big advocate for keeping rent down, and I think that's a huge part of, the city's got to work together, because there comes a point when you're a landlord and you either want to be a pig or you want the community to thrive.
Yeah.
Right? It's like cilantro. There's no in between. You either love it or hate it. Right? And so I think landlords need to really start working with the restaurateurs. And of course, the economics right now, everything is heightened. Yeah. But that goes back to the Alan Watts. Where really are we in all of this? Yeah. And if we step back and observe, we really can help one another to make this city New York. It's like there's this song that New York had an Ambien during September 11th, right? I feel like it still has. Like, where New York needs that like defibrillator again. Yeah. And it's like, it's sad to walk by places and see them close.
Well, it's affordability. When you look at all the politics, it's like the old thing, it's the economy stupid. Mm-hmm. And since then, obviously, how our current mayor, Mamdani, got elected, so much of affordability. It's that you need to have a city where all different types of people can live. Mm-hmm. And the creative class, when you talk about, the 90s and then the early 2000s and, where we are today, it is so difficult for people to live in New York City because of the cost of living. And that's a combination of
But yet so many people do.
But still, exactly.
I mean, it blows my mind.
And people want to be here. But how do we get people here that can stay here? And how do we provide opportunities for people, so they have opportunities to do things that, you hear these great stories. They bought the building, they got this
my
business.
Grandfather
did. And those stories of starting off as a dishwasher and then one day,
cereal, busboy at Delmonico's.
So
didn't speak English.
Yeah, you have all these, incredible stories, and how do we revive that? And then, on the politics part of the show, it's just that we need our government officials, who so often are always saying, small business, backbone of our community, backbone of our culture. We need to support them. We need to sustain them. But too often, so many of those same politicians enact laws and policies that make it more and more difficult for those exact types of businesses to survive.
Well, it comes down to practice what you preach, and also like immigration, right? They are the foundation of the hospitality industry.
Absolutely.
My mother, an immigrant, a war refugee. My grandfather, an immigrant. Syria, an immigrant. Tony May, an immigrant. When you look at immigration and when you look at I look at teams and restaurants and I'm thinking, these guys, men and women, are busting their asses just so they can have that American dream, and what they do to support their family, and how easy people view them as less than. Yeah. Right? And that's why the busboy, you never know, is going to be the next. Sirio Maccioni is the perfect example. And I love all the sons. He would never ever say that he was a busboy at Delmonico's. Yeah. And I will tell you this as a fact, that when immigration would come back in the day to Delmonico's, my grandfather would put cereal all the way up in the penthouse, because immigration never knew that we had the restaurant up there. That's where Rock Hudson went to when he brought his boyfriend, right? So when you think about, cereal didn't speak English. Cereal was hidden by my grandfather in the attic, let's say, when immigration came, and went from being a busboy to owning Le Cirque, to having HBO do a documentary, A Table in Heaven, right? To becoming one of the most important restaurateurs that not only was he, but who came out of the cereal school and who's there today. That cover of that magazine, circle right back to that. It was an immigrant who made that cover possible. Damn, that was
true.
Good.
That was amazing.
I need a drink of water from my fancy mug.
Listen, my family, same thing, your family, and it's really the New York story. It's like the American story.
It's that American dream.
It is.
People don't have it anymore, and they're suffocated because you have corporations that are coming in, taking over, making things impossible to do, politicians making things impossible to do, and you've taken that American dream and you've crushed it. So where's that defibrillator to make people feel like they can dream again?
Yep.
My grandfather was a daydreamer. I'm a total daydreamer. We've got to dream bigger and don't let our daydreams be interrupted by politicians who don't want to see the dream come true.
That is the most perfect way to end this.
And just like that.
And just like that. But you know what? This is what's so important because, like I said, if you talk about immigrants and you talk about food.
There's a difference between talking about and celebrating. We need to celebrate more.
You celebrate it. And when you look at why our restaurant, to go full circle, when you look at why our restaurant industry is so incredible, so delicious, so diverse, so vibrant, it is because immigrants from around the world, whether they're newly arrived immigrants or they're descendants of immigrants who arrived to the shores generations ago, they have put their blood, sweat, and tears and their love into our industry. And that's why we have so many amazing stories to tell and so many more to create.
Yeah. Look, when you see hospitality in politics, right? Imagine if the industry of hospitality became the industry of politics. Oh. It would be so sweet. Imagine if Melba were the mayor of New York.
I know. I have to say, for Melba served 2 terms as president of the New York City Hospitality Alliance, and much of that was through the pandemic.
Yeah.
And to be able to work hand in hand with my sister Melba through what was arguably the most difficult time, not just for New York, but for our industry. And to be in that leadership role, rallying elected officials, rallying our industry to make sure that we could get support and we could still support our communities. We were losing everything, but our industry was out there feeding people, supporting people.
I think we have to also note, because this is airing during the period, it's Restaurant Week, right? Is happening now, right? So that encourages people to go out, be part of the community. If restaurants seem like they're unaffordable, now's the time to experience that.
Yes.
And New York is offering that. So Delmonico's does it. Come to the restaurants that you feel like maybe it was for a special occasion. Today's that special occasion.
100%. Go out, whether it's Restaurant Week or every day could be Restaurant Day. I always consider going out as not just a great experience socially and for my taste buds, but it's also a civic duty.
It is.
Max Tucci.
I look forward to welcoming you to the table.
I cannot wait to be at that table with you. Thanks so much for coming on Hospitality and Politics, powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. I am Andrew Ridgie, and we will see you next time.
Ciao.